All righty. I think we are now recording. Again, good afternoon. Let's see. All right. That's exactly okay. I'm just checking the comments now. People are off screen because they are eating. Smart move. Smart move. um, thank you again for joining us and being a part of this work in progress symposium. I want to share something that I have been thinking about for a while, ever since the 2024 election. And when I started crunching numbers and started listening to the rhetoric of reasons why Trump won or Harris lost or vice versa, I knew that there was a lot of potential for rhetoric. I want to make sure that everybody can hear me and see me. Just give me a thumbs up or something to make sure that, because I cannot see everybody on the screen. Thank you, Christine. I got you now. Yep. Thank you, Michelle. Um, so as I was saying, I was looking at this as um, a rhetorical conundrum, because on the one hand, people were talking about the economy in such glowing ways, like lowest unemployment and record job growth, and coming out of a recession as quickly as we have ever come out of a recession before, and so on and so forth. But on the other hand, the economy was supposed to be the main issue, right? The economy was supposed to be the main issue. But what I want to kind of do in my works in progress is kind of delve into that just a little bit, and just see what's really going on. And like I said, this is truly a work in progress because I have not looked at all of the data points that I need to look at, and especially all of the rhetoric surrounding it. But I do want to make some observations. So I titled this, "You Can't Be a Christian and Vote Democrat, Progressive Policies, Conservative Candidates." And I take that "you can't be a Christian and vote Democrat" from a preacher here in my home state of Tennessee, who preaches that actually from the pulpit, and um, literally tells Democrats that they are not welcome in his church. So let's move on. In 2024, a majority of voters re-elected Donald Trump as president of the United States. Not only did voters elect Trump as president, but they gave Republican majorities in the House and the Senate. While many view this as an utter rejection of Democrats and their policies, my argument is a closer examination of the election results reveal a different story. In several states that voted for conservatives up and down the ballot, many of the same voters supported, quote, progressive initiatives and policies such as constitutional right to have an abortion, make reproductive decisions, legalize recreational marijuana, increase minimum wage, and require sick leave. And for this works in progress presentation, I just asked the question, why did voters elect candidates that are diametrically opposed to these policies, while at the same time, in the same election, support these policies? And what I want to do for this particular election, I just want to focus on conservative, all the way top down conservative states. Because if I bring in other states, this becomes even more glaring. I just want to focus today on the conservative states that voted up and down the ballot conservatively. And let's start with Florida. 29 electoral votes. And you can see, I take these snapshots and these screenshots rather from CNN and their election coverage. As you can see, Florida has 30 electoral votes. They have another vote. So you see where Donald Trump easily wins. What's that? By 53 for 13. about 13% over Kamala Harris. You see where Rick Scott wins easily over his opponent in the Senate race. This is a red state, right? But let's look at constitutional right to abortion in the same election. 57% voted for a constitutional right to abortion. 57%, 6 million, right about the same amount of people who voted for President Trump. Legalize recreational marijuana. 55% voted for, quote, progressive initiatives and policies. By the way, this still failed in the state of Florida because right before this 2024 election, the state House and Senate, state legislature passed a referendum where you must get 60% of the vote to change a constitutional or to add a constitutional amendment or to get amendments passed in the state of Florida. So at 57.2, that failed in the state of Florida, but an overwhelming majority. What if 57% that voted for the constitutional right of abortion would have voted for the candidate that supported abortion rights? Moving on. What about Alaska? Very conservative state. Trump wins easily in Alaska. But Alaskans also wanted to increase the minimum wage and require sick leave. 58%, about the same amount that Trump won his election with. A measure that would increase minimum wage in Alaska. Moving on to the state of Montana. 4 electoral votes, Trump wins easily here. No surprise there. Tim Sheehy beats John Tester, by the way, who was the incumbent, who had won, I think, at least twice before this election. And, you know, the difference is a little bit smaller, as you can see here. Montana voted for the Attorney General, a Republican Attorney General, conservative Secretary of State. But even in Montana, when it came to the constitutional right for an abortion, 57.8%. Let's move on to Missouri, the show me state. No surprise here, 18 points. Trump over Harris. Josh Hawley over Lucas Kuntz. No surprise really here. The governor. No really surprise here, but this becomes important in a minute. Secretary of State, Lieutenant Governor, Attorney General, all Republicans, all conservatives. But when we get to the constitutional right to make reproductive decisions, 51% of Missourians said, we want that right. That's a majority. And while at the same time, they voted to raise the minimum wage at 57%. Now, this is actually in real time important because, let me just go back real quick. That governor who won by 38, 48, 58 with 21 points. He signed a bill rolling back voter-approved minimum wage and sick leave 6 months after getting into office. So the question I had when I started looking at these numbers is, again, people voted for the progressive policies, but not the candidate that purported to be for the progressive policies. So why is that? What is happening here? And you get a whole lot of political scientists are still debating about, some people voted, they only voted for the president and didn't go down ballot, and people skipped the presidency and went down ballot, so on and so forth. There's a whole lot of different things. And like I said, I wanted to stay in the conservative states for a moment in this presentation, because when you bring in like Nevada and North Carolina, and North Carolina was really a state that voted Democratic all the way down the ballot, except at the top of the ballot. So when you bring in those, then you get a bigger, picture. But if we just stay with these states that I mentioned here, you have to begin to ask yourself, what is going on? And one of the things that I want to argue right now is that, and I get some pushback, even from folk who are sensitive to my arguments. I am going to argue that the arguments that progressives are making are actually being listened to. They are actually being voted on. When you put it on the ballot, they will go out and vote, even in the most conservative states. So what is holding folk back? Many people believe that Democrats are demons. This is the research part. This is my work in progress. I want to look at the rhetoric surrounding 21 ways the devil is using the Democratic Party to destroy America. That's from Charisma magazine. Ruled by Demons, exploring the relationship between belief in demons and public attitudes toward Donald Trump and Joe Biden. Even scholars now are looking into this. And from the conversation, Republicans draw from apocalyptic narratives to Democrat conspiracy theories. So when you mix in conspiracy theories, is the reason why people who vote for these progressive policies cannot vote for the candidate that support the progressive policies? Because the rhetoric surrounding, and this goes back to church, this goes to religion, this goes to religious communication, this goes to sacred rhetoric, the areas in which I study. Is it because, quite frankly, they just cannot see themselves voting for someone who they think may be the devil incarnate? And I'm going to stop there. Thank you. And I will open up for questions. I could, I can make some more comments. I'm laughing at Cassandra's post. But I just want to open there and just get some feedback and questions and all of that good stuff. So here I am. Not everybody at once now. Golly, I can't.
I'll get us started. Since you're picking on my former state, the used car salesman as the governor. So I am really intrigued by this. You are speaking my language, and as a bootleg political scientist, very bootleg. One of the things that I've been thinking about, I want you to say more about this, right? So this belief that it is the devil incarnate means that there's some embedded theology here, that's also akin to white Christian nationalism, that's also akin even to what's happening in Israel, and this way in which the intersectionality, or this the way in which they have intertwined God and country, and how they situate themselves in being God's hands, God with a real little G and
Hmm.
several question marks. Um, how they situate themselves as being God's hands in bringing forth. So if the Dems are the devil incarnate, who are they seeing um their savior as being, right? And what is his role in all of the imps that represent that regime? What is their role?
Hmm.
So really interested in hearing you articulate more around like these theological underpinnings of this. I continue to say with colleagues and etc., this is not a political problem, but it's really a theological problem. So
Yeah.
I'm really all
Mm.
over this.
Thank you for the question, and I would tend to agree with you. It's definitely theological at its foundation. Many of my colleagues that study rhetoric and communication studies, some who even study religious communication, um, don't really understand the vibrancy of white evangelical theology and how it is the normative embedded theological foundation here in this country. Period. It is it is why you're either, supportive and you are, a faithful Christian, or why you have left Christianity in the church altogether. Usually it is because of this understanding of Christianity in this in shape, form, and fashion. So when preachers and teachers and podcasters and that whole framework start to say to their adherents, you cannot vote for this person because this person represents the devil. So they will immediately go to, of course, the abortion and go to LGBTQIA issues. They will go to the yes, the pedophile and all of that, which now is getting a comeuppance in the news right now. If you ask me, and maybe people are gonna have to start re-examining that. But the point is that if this becomes a fabric of your faith, policy then is not going. Policy is going to matter a little bit, but it's not going to change the outcome. Everybody's talking about the Dems or the progressives need a new message. The message to me is actually resonating. People understand if you're working hard, you want more money. I mean, if you give me a choice, I'm going to pick that choice. But the person that the disconnect is, I think, and I'm putting on my little old political what a political organizer hat, I guess. The disconnect is not seeing that, especially in Missouri. Missouri is the prime example here. That we must also elect and support folk who support these progressive initiatives, or they can just be taken away from us quickly. And so I think the theology, not everybody, this is not one of those, sweeping indictments, but I think it is enough that when I start to dig and find out the structures and look at it from a rhetorical point of view, that I do believe that there is something there. That what also has to happen is that there must be a reinterpretation of the faith, a reinterpretation of a theological framework and foundation, and that in order, and politically, in order to receive what it is that you're trying to vote for. This is one of the reasons, by the way, y'all, this is one of the reasons why the Democrats actually thought that they had a good hand this time. Because typically and usually when you have initiatives on the ballot during a presidential election that would bring people out, like legalizing recreational marijuana, they were hoping that they would get people that, hey, I never really kind of vote, but hey, if you're going to legalize, I'm going to go ahead on and vote. And while I'm in the booth, I'm going to vote for the person who is promoting that, who is supporting that with me. But that just didn't happen this time. And by the way, just to show you how powerful I think, this is, those states I just mentioned, if Harris would have carried those states, now I know they're conservative, it would have been 273 to 265 for Harris.
Are you still taking responses?
That's what we're doing right now.
Oh, okay. I just figured out on my phone how to unmute myself.
Oh, okay.
On this topic, I had to go back to maybe a few years ago when Biden first won. And okay, all right, first let me look at the so-called sins of the Democratic Party that they are putting on the ballot. Yes, abortion and marijuana and all those things, but look at the sin that they're not putting on the ballot, since we're talking about them being of Satan or the devil, the father of lies. That sin right there, that particular title, is not on the ballot, and I believe that's what the people are looking at. The Democratic Party has lied to the point where the last president they had, Joe Biden, most people, myself included, I looked at him as somebody who was incompetent and was, even when he was voted in, I talked about this in class a few years ago. And the reason why I couldn't see myself voting for him is because he was incompetent. If he was incompetent to be the president, because it was clearly showing signs of somewhat mental incompetency, I'm like, who will be running the country?
Yep.
Because clearly he wouldn't be running the country. And if we don't know who's running the country, that fear of not knowing who's accountable is a bigger threat than some tyrant who is in office right now, in my opinion. And people are seeing this. While he is a tyrant, you know what he is. He does, for the most part, tend to speak truth, even when he try not to. So I'm looking at it and then another aspect from a theologian perspective is sometimes God places tyrants in positions in order to bring people back to him.
Okay.
That's just my perspective.
Okay, no problem. So, I mean, I'm specifically talking about not getting into the candidates right now, but we can have that discussion at a later time. I'm specifically talking about people who understand a political party as being devils and demons. And if that's not you, if you have other reasons why you did not vote for Harris, then that's over here. That's what I'm talking about right now, though. But even in your analysis and your answer, it seems as if you, in a shorthanded way, said, well, the devil we know is better than the devil we don't know. And so we're still going back to the earlier conversation when we talked about when I think Dr. Matlock brought up witches, and we were talking about sinners and all of that. Now we're talking about devils and demons and stuff like that. So, but if that's not you, then that's fine. There are people, and that's my work. My work is to try to demonstrate. Now, if I get in there and they find out that it's a small number, then then I will find that out and I will say that. But I am of the belief that there are a lot of people who will vote for, again, the Progressive Initiative on each and every going down the line. Do you want this? Do you support this? Do you support this? And then will support candidates that do not support what it is that they want to have. Michelle.
I'm still forming this question a little bit in my head, but I'm trying to consider the difference between making a decision about a policy and making a decision that's based in a person or a personality or even the confidence of that particular person's rhetoric.
Right.
And how closely someone might relate to a person's rhetoric, even while able to look at a policy that contradicts that rhetoric. And where is the relationship between the voters' particular hate preferences? So, how, one, is your research looking at that particular aspect of it, or maybe yet? And also, is there a way to look at that? Like, how do you?
Right.
I mean, I can, again, this is still forming in my head, right? But I can think of that particular candidate is saying that they hate the same people I hate, or putting a fear into me that I should hate particular people, and it resonates with me in a particular way. And so I say yes. But when I'm looking at the policy, then I'm not connecting it with a particular person who's tapping into my lower gears. And so it's easier for me to make that decision. I'm also thinking about how many Republican voters didn't realize that they were on Obamacare. So literally saying the words, we hate Obamacare, or Obamacare is the worst, blah, 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 at the very same time having Obamacare as their health insurance. So there's obviously some disconnect there, but is there a way that you're talking about that right now?
No. The beginning stages of this work is to demonstrate that there is some type of rhetoric out there that that says that to vote Democrat is to vote for the devil. That's the foundation of the research initially. However, you are opening it up for me and for in my way of thinking, that I'm hoping that others will come behind me, if I can get this out, to do the more quantitative stuff, to do the interviews, to do more qualitative stuff, to kind of look at this and examine this. I am of the belief, and this is just the theory, right? This is my belief. I am of the belief if we keep asking and pressing that we will get that, I just can't trust them. I just don't like them. Why? Well, they support so-and-so, and it doesn't matter whether it's true or not. It is what people are feeling. Now, let me tell you what also hopefully my research is doing. It is also pushing back on reason discourse as a bona fide answer to hey, long as I find that perfect argument, man, I know that reasoned folk would just say, hey, that makes sense. our whole rhetorical, I mean, really communication studies, not just rhetoric, just communication studies have focused on reason, discourse, and argument. Let me find the right words. Let me find the right, and my argument is, even when you do find the right words, and even when people agree with you that you in that particular time find the right words. Going to your Obamacare example, if I don't think if you put on the ballot that this is why no state would do this, because especially if the state don't have an expansion of Medicare, for instance. If you put on that Medicare expansion, most people are going to vote for that, but they're going to vote for also politicians that have systematically denied that each and every time that they tried to do that work. And last point about my research, I think is going to, hopefully open up some stuff as well too, is that I want us to really begin to understand who is out here, and this is going back into my social movement days, or social movement thinking. Who is out there really trying to fight against the system? Who's trying to hold up democracy and all of that? Is it the people who voted for the candidates and the progressive policies and normally who would be out there anyway? Or is it the people that now have an epiphany and gone out and say, I'm wrong with this. I need to, see the error of my ways. I don't think there are a lot of folk out there like that. I think people are still in their own camps. And I want rhetorical scholars, I invite rhetorical scholars to come up with new understandings and new ways in order to get this type of messaging across, if that's what you want to do. Because the old ways of doing it is not working. Anybody else? I thought I saw a hand up. Maybe I was wrong. Christine, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I figured out.
Jason, all right.
Yeah, thank you for that. The first thing, when you were talking about those initiatives, the first thing that came to mind to me was Bernie Sanders, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think wasn't this what he was doing in 2016? It was trying to reach across the aisle and say about the percentages of Republicans, right?
Yeah.
So actually, I was starting to think that, and then I realized you're talking about initiatives, and because I think he was talking about percentages of people who support this, but you're talking about initiatives that people actually voted on.
Right. And I think you're right, though. And in the longer paper, I would talk about the polling. These actually poll well as well. So that's what Bernie was talking about in 2016 and 2020 and 2024. I mean, the initiatives are polling well. People are coming in droves to hear people talk about this, but it's not resonating. That's my whole. I guess that's my whole thing. So it's not resonating. Oh, but go ahead, Jason. I'm sorry.
No, I was wondering if that was if you're foregrounding your findings in that, and then but another question I just had, I just don't know, is the Democrats, or do you look at the influence of maybe Bernie and why is that a factor in why they had those initiatives on the ballot?
I think that you're absolutely right. It fired up the base. To get initiatives on the ballot, you need a social movement on the ground to get signatures. So, and in some states, you almost have to have 500,000 signatures. That's hard to do. And it takes a year or two just to get it on, and you have deadlines to meet and all of that. And people in states that don't want those initiatives on the ballot would do everything in their power to say you've fallen short or you missed this, and whole lot of court battles. But you're absolutely right. I think that People like Bernie Sanders, AOC, BLM, people who have really talked about these progressive initiatives and how it would help everybody. William Barber in the Poor People's Campaign, everybody. He's been saying the same thing for years. Like, if the South would just partner up, you're going to have a whole revolution going on in the South with Southern states. But, it is the disconnect still from that excitement on the ground to having a partner in office that will actually implement what it is that you're fighting for.
Mm-hmm. I have an unrelated question, but I think Cassandra wants to.
No, go ahead.
Could you tell us a little bit more about the preacher that you started with? Said progressives can't vote Democrat.
Who now said the preacher? I said what? I heard
you opened your presentation with saying progressive Christians can't vote Democrat. Is that right?
Oh yeah. What was the guy down in Tennessee? Tom. Remember the guy with the tent? You know who I'm talking about.
Greg Locke.
Greg Locke. Yep. Greg Locke. Locke. Thank you.
But what was the rationale for that?
Now that would be a hard question for me to answer because I don't think he has one, but I will argue that it is just an embedded belief that it is part about, supporting the GOP and all of that as well, but it's an embedded belief that his own theology just would not allow it to happen, and he sees himself as a fighter for God and a warrior for God, and he wants to pick up a sword and fight for God and yells and screams and do a whole lot of that, and but for his motivation, I would have no clue.
I guess that's kind of getting at, as a rhetorical theologian, I don't know that there's a magic answer that you can just come back to these folks with. But I do wonder about maybe ethos and what a progressive ethos might add to the dismantling of that kind of rhetoric. Because I'm sitting here thinking, like, I don't know how you combat apocalyptic rhetoric that's actually about power maintenance rather than power critique. And when we try to compete with that apocalyptic rhetoric, we always lose because we're not willing to go so far as they are to dehumanize, right? Like Hillary Clinton was like, oh, they're a basket of deplorables. And they acted like that was the worst thing ever. And then they turned around and talked about elected a guy who's talking about immigrants eating cats and dogs, and not to mention all the other nasty things he says. And it's like, rhetorically, we're outpowered when we play that game because I mean, I think we have our own ethical issues, but we're not ethically willing to go that far in the apocalypse. And so I wonder, like, what our ethos can or cannot contribute to the conversation. I just feel stuck in a circle on that.
Right. And that's what I want to, and what Tom just did was name the feeling that a lot of progressives have. And I want to kind of say yes. And here may be one of the reasons why you're having that feeling. Because you're not going to come back and say, no, they're the devil and they're wicked and they're evil and stuff like that. Then you might go as far as say some of the things that they do, but inherently evil, you wouldn't do that. Cassandra, you had your hand up. Cassandra, can you hear me?
I was trying to learn how to get off mute. 70 years later. I gotta go back. Do I remember what I was going? Oh, I know what I was going to say. I think, and again, not trying to like have the rhetorical answer to this. But some of this is also about parties and how they disinvest in, and I'll say the so-called liberal party, so-called liberal party, and how they actually basically follow the same map, somewhat, not well, how they disinvest in some of the people, right? And so, and I'm real sensitive about this coming from
Keep
Missouri.
talking. I'll be right back.
All of these ballot initiatives don't come from the party; they come from the people, right? As a person who led organizing that got Medicaid expansion in that state, that got the wage raised in 2018, got age lowered for juveniles, and etc. I mean, intricately involved in leading those ballot initiatives. Parties disinvest in that, particularly in presidential election years, because they're following a math that says these 6 to 7 states will decide the presidential election, and everybody else is basically abandoned. And so there is something about abandonment that one side has figured out. Even, I had to disagree with the participant who talks about the chief amongst liars. That one side has figured out that even if they lie to you about the price of eggs, they are going to actually speak to you. So there are states and places that people feel ignored and unheard by party figures, but the work on the ground has allowed them to have issues that reflect their self-interest that actually speak to them. So there's something about the rhetoric of lies as well, and the repetition of lies that actually help to misinform people about candidates, while they're actually seem to act as if they're fully informed when they vote for issues. So I just need to add that to the mix.
Now, I think you're right on point, and especially talking about, and I'm gonna get to you, Anthony, especially talking about where these initiatives typically come from. They do come from the ground. They do come from activists and protesters and people who are engaged more so with everyday folk. And one of the things that I thought about, and maybe going back to Tom's conundrum, which we both have from time to time, or how to relate and how to talk. One of the things that come to mind is that many of the folk who have fought to get those initiatives on the ballot, right, are some of the same folk who will vote for the initiative, but would think that those people are the enemy. That the people who are working, who are doing the hard work of getting stuff on the ballot for you to be protected, for all people really to be protected, are some of the same folk on Sunday. They will hear that they are demons and you don't believe them, and so on and so forth. Let's go to Dr. Everett and then Jessica.
Yeah, I think it is the nature of so-called democracy, representative democracy, and it represents only the oligarchs of the society when we really look at it. And we never had a democracy in this country, and that's the nature of the system. We never had true democracy. This representative democracy is not democracy. So we get to that basic fact, as basic as racism is the original sin of this society. And until we get to those and realize those things, and I say I think the people on this call realize that, but beyond this call, when the overall society realizes any of this, then there can be some real change. And the only way they're going to realize is when it impacts them directly in some form or fashion. Just my thought.
Oh, good point. Jessica.
All right, sorry, like Dr. Gould, I had to remember about how to get out of mute. So I've been doing climate justice work from an interfaith perspective for a couple of decades now, and I've watched it become more and more partisan. It is by its nature nonpartisan. It doesn't matter who you vote for. Everybody needs clean water, clean air, needs to be able to eat the food that comes from our soil, right? Nixon established the EPA, for Christ's sake. So I've watched that happen, but the phenomenon that you're talking about, Dr. J, I've watched that also happen where the individual issues can break through the political rhetoric and people can get on board with an issue. And one of the things I think is happening is that we've had this interesting flip in party and identity, that it used to be that you chose a party or party affiliation based on some alignment around policy issues, that parties held the policies. And now I think that that the two-party system has devolved so thoroughly into the red team, blue team bullshit that it no longer has those inherent policy issues attached to them. They have become identity themselves, whether you are part of a blue wave or part of a red line, right? Both groups sort of think of themselves in those savior mentalities. Neither is, again, as Dr. Gould mentioned, really speaking about the mechanics and the needs of the people on the ground. And this is not a Michael Moore in 2000 sort of both parties are the same kind of nonsense. That's not what I'm talking about. And I do think that some of the shifts in party identity around policy issues, like the Democrats about 10 years ago became okay with vouchers and charter schools officially as a party, which I think was really undermined their credibility with people on the ground, although it got them a lot of money. Great. So I think that's part of why people vote against their self-interest, because the entrenchment around party identity is become disassociated from policy. And it really is part of a team identity. I think at a state level, if Republicans wanted to gain power again, they'd find smart, articulate Republicans who believed in climate change and racial inequality. Like, those things didn't used to be not things that you couldn't talk about and be a conservative.
Right.
Anyway, I think that's part of what has happened, is that shifting, the disassociation between party and policy.
All right. Well, we wanted to go to 12:45, and it's 12:47 now, but we will take another comment or question before we break and finish our lunch and come back at 1:30. If there's anything else, anybody want to add anything else? All right. So I hope to be able to present this in a little bit more fuller way a little bit later on this year. But thank you for indulging me and sharing my work in progress. And we will come back at, making sure I'm just looking, okay, yep. We'll come back at 1:30.